Satnam, hello everyone. Good to see you here. Satnam Sohail, Satnam Infinite Stories. Thank you for joining us. Today we have it's one of those Thursdays that is free days, free topics, whatever you suggest, I will explore. And I believe it was Infinite Stories, wasn't it you, who asked me the last day to explore the Mandukya Upanishad that was your favorite Upanishad? So I think we can do that today. I think it would be nice to explore that. Mandukya Upanishad is a very special one. It's considered the most important of all the Upanishads, and that's a lot to say because the Upanishads are like the jewel of the Hindu teachings coming from Vedas. Yeah, the Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. The Upanishads are considered the end of the Vedas. They're generally put at the end, and they consider to be the explanation of the practices that we have to do to reach the final state that we want to achieve. So Upanishads are considered the jewel. Upanishads are not religion, they are not dogma, they are not ritual, they are practices and they are experienced. So the Upanishads have this capacity to don't just describe something grandiose, but actually take us there in some way. And there is many Upanishads. Is supposed to, apparently there was many more that we don't know if they continue to exist and maybe they have disappeared, but we know at least of 108. 108 is a very significant number, and sacred number. I have a video on that as well. But out of these 108 different Upanishads, which are generally distributed along the different Vedas, like explaining different aspects of the Vedas, some of them are associated with more Hinduistic or more some of them more like Shiva, some of them more like Vishnu, things like that. There is some of these Upanishads which are general. They are considered to be like the higher tier of Upanishads. I don't think it was me, never heard of it. Maybe it was Infinity. It must have been Infinity. Yes, maybe I mixed both of you. So, yeah, Mandukya Upanishad. So, Upanishads, they appeared later on. And we don't really know when were they created, because we know when they were written down, more or less 500 to 1000 BCE, before Christ. So that's very old, but that's more or less when many of these teachings were written down, because that's when writing was more formalized and more common, more available as well. So we know that that's when they would be written, but who knows how long they were transmitted orally. So we don't know that. What we do know is that first came the Vedas, and the Vedas created, there's all sort of religious movement linked to the Vedas, but then the Upanishads would be the practical and the culmination of those Vedas. Now, out of these Upanishads, Upanishad, by the way, means it's upa means near, ni is down, and then shat would be sitting. So sitting down near, and the tradition would be that there's one teacher guiding through the Upanishad, and the students would sit near him or her and receive these teachings. So Upanishad would be this: to gather together, to sit together, and to listen to these teachings and put them into practice. So out of all the Upanishads, I said there's a number of them which are the more general ones, the most relevant ones. I think is like 10 to 12 of those. And it's said like the essence of all of those, that's the Mandukya Upanishad. So we could say that today's Upanishad is the culmination of all these, the highest one of all these Upanishads. And this is an Upanishad. It's quite simple, it's quite short, it's only 12 lines. And it's, I guess as usual with these spiritual teachings, you can interpret it in many ways. But it's quite precise, quite concise about what he's saying. And the interpretation comes more like an interpretation is like an elaboration of what he's saying. Because it's not like you take a word and you could see it in different ways that could be contradicting. But it's more about what is it talking about? What does it mean? But even the very Upanishad is warning us that there is this final stage that we want to get to is one that it goes beyond what we can reason with our mind. So whatever we say about that, it will not be that, because when we are expressing things, we're expressing them with the mind. And so it's, in a way, it's futile to try to describe the final stage. But then if you don't talk about it, then how do you know that it's there? And how do you connect to the possibility of reaching there? And how do we walk the steps to get there? So we have to talk about it in some way, even though we may never really achieve an understanding that is from the mind about what is happening there. So Mandukya Upanishad, I think we can just read the description of it and like different lines. And I've downloaded one translation of the Upanishad that you can find in the web swamij.com. I love this website. I'm going to write it in the chat. Let me just write it one moment. swamij.com. Yeah. Does it appear in the screen? Yeah, there we go. And this website is like a treasure chest of knowledge and wisdom throughout the ages. I really appreciate the effort that they made into bringing clarity to these teachings, translating many of the original Sanskrit. And I think this is the Himalayan Institute. I think it's from the same line as Swami Rama, which was a very influential yogi. He was one of the first ones who came to the West. When I say the West, I'm talking generally it was into the US, even though yoga would arrive to Europe in a different way. But he would be one of these first yogis who would submit himself to research, scientific research, and they would put electrodes in his body and he would stop the heart and he would create all sorts of things that the scientists wouldn't know what to do with him, like 2 sensors in the hand and changing the temperature in one in relationship to the other one. And just saying, okay, I'm going to stop my heart now. Do you have everything recording? Yeah, he stops his heart and he continues talking. And everybody's like panicking. Like, is he going to die? Are we going to be responsible for this guy? What's happening here? So that's kind of funny. So that shows that he had an incredible command over his own physical body, apart from other spiritual progress that he had made, not just on the body. But, the body is an easy, fast way to show that you are in control of these basic biological processes that nobody can really control, or very few people can. So from a scientific point of view, it's very difficult to check, oh yeah, this guy is entering samadhi. How do you do that? How do you even sense it? Can you put electrodes in the brain and sense, oh, now he's entering into this stage of samadhi? It's very hard to prove that, but you can definitely say, well, I'm going to stop my heart and stop it, right? So that's something that you can demonstrate. And by this beginning of the arrival of these yogis into India, starting from the very end of 1890 something, I think it was, 92 or something like that, when Swami Vivekananda came and gave the very famous speech on the United Nations. And then moving on, and we have all these yogis like Paramahansa Yogananda and Swami Rama and others. This is the beginning of the romance between the East and the West. And so these yogis, when they come into the West, they would understand that this is a good way to captivate the Western attention, to demonstrate through physical means something that science would consider that it's not possible. I remember Yogananda arriving and giving his lectures, and in his lectures he would just stand up and say, okay, push me. And he would have 8, 10, 12 people, strong people, even firemen, all pushing him, and he would just not move. He would just use his energy and just stay still, and thinking, that's impossible, how can he do that? So these are good ways to demonstrate something that science doesn't understand, and therefore proving, well, look, if this you think it's not possible and it's happening, then please listen to the other things that I have to say. So that was the gateway to entering into the other teachings. Satnam Infinity, I was just checking, was it you that said the other day about talking about the Mandukya Upanishad? I think it was you. So we're going to do that today, and just setting up the scene for the direction that we are going. So certainly the effort worked, even though it kind of went a little bit against the basic idea of what yoga is, because by seducing the Western psyche into checking biological processes that can be altered and noticing how something physical like the body can be controlled to a level that couldn't be understood before, that made the Western attention be more directed towards the physical body. And I believe that's part of why then particularly postures, asanas, I was going to say hatha yoga, but hatha yoga is more than just asanas. So particularly, let's just say asanas became the center focus of yogic practice in the West traditionally, and then this has been evolving over the years, and now we are in a moment when most people who practice yoga are aware of the spiritual side, and many of them include it into their practice, and so we are reaching a point where it's back into the original understanding of what yoga is meant to do, not just for the body, but it's actually to connect to Atman, to the soul. And so this is the perfect moment to contemplate this Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad. So how about we read it? And as I mentioned, it's very, very short. It's only 12 lines, and considered like the distillation of all the essence of all the other 108 or something Upanishads. It's more than 108, but anyway. And the Upanishads are the distillation of the essence of the Vedas. So we are having here like the crown jewel of all these teachings. So let's go for that. Blip. There we go. Mandukya Upanishad. So let me just remind you then that this text, the explanation of what the Sanskrit means, is taken from the website swamij.com. So that's where if you want to find more information on this Upanishad and anything else, I recommend going to that website. No, it was another person, but Mandukya Upanishad is non-dual, so it says me and the person are one and the same. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so it was you. And it was also Infinite Stories and Sohail as well. I don't know who was it that recommended it then, but anyway, I'm taking the opportunity to explore it. So we're going to go there. So Hari Om, salutations, blessings from the infinite. And let's read this. All is Om. Hari Om. Hari is also it can be used, I mean, I can see it as a salutation, but it's also, Hari contains Har, and it's a kind of creative energy. Very similar to Kar. Kar is creating, but Har, which we often vibrate it in the navel. In yoga, we often do exercises in which we are moving the navel and chanting Har. And sometimes we even say Har, Hare, Hari. Wow, hey Guru, for example, no? So Hari is connected to this creative aspect of God. Oh, not this, that one. The whole universe is the syllable Om. The whole universe is Om. Following is the exposition of Om. Everything that was, is, or will be, is in truth Om. Everything that was, is, or will be. So that's the past, the present, and the future is, in truth, Om. Now this is an interesting sentence. It contains, let me just check. Yeah, I'm not sure whether in the original Sanskrit it says whether is in truth Om. I don't see it. I say Sarvam Omkara Eva. Eva, it means it is that. It's Omkara. But I don't see truth being the word as Satya. I don't see it. But it's interesting anyway, because I remember reading this book from Osho where he was exploring what is truth. And he was saying, well, truth is something that doesn't change. Something that was, something that is, and something that will be. If I think that I am, let's say I'm happy today, and I think that's true. It's true that I am happy. That's part of who I am. Well, it isn't, because if a few days ago I was not happy, or if in a few days I will not be happy, then that happiness is not the true essence, it's not true, because it didn't happen and it will again disappear at some point. Which makes you question, well, what is true then? I am a man. Well, I am a man right now, but was I a man in a past life? Will I be a man again after I die? I will become dust, and from dust I come, into dust I will come. So that's not true either. I'm not this body, because this body is here right now, but it wasn't here before and it will not be afterwards. So that's not true either. And so you start removing all these layers of what is not truth. And what you come up with is, if you find the essence of something that was, something that is, and something that will be, that essence will be truth. And well, if you've watched the course that I did on the Mul Mantra, this would resonate very strongly, because when we were chanting the Mul Mantra, Ekonkar Satnam Kartapurak Nirbo Nirvera Kalmurata Junise Bangur Pasajap Atsa Jugatsat Heavy Satnana Hosibisach, there were two moments when this truth happens very strongly. One is, we say, Ekonkar Satanam. Satanam means that's the true identity, and you ask, well, what is the true identity? Ekonkar. And Ekonkar means that we are all one. What infinity was just saying, yeah? Non-duality, that we are all the same, we are all connected. So it is saying Satnam, the true identity, is that we are all connected, that we are all the same, in the same way, Ekonkar. And then the second part in the Mul Mantra, where Sat, truth, appears, it appears in a different pronunciation, which is Sach, but it's an evolution. It's probably more like a dialectic thing in the north of India, and it means the same, means truth. And it's saying, At Satjugat Sathevi Sasnana Hosivisaj. It's saying that was true in the past, it is true now, it will be true in the future. So it is describing exactly what we are just reading here. Everything that was, is, or will be, is in truth Om. And the Mul Mantra starts with Ek Om Kar. So here we have this Hari Om, yeah? And we are saying that this is truth. This is in essence the truth. So there is a universal truth, bigger than any circumstantial or individual truth that we may have, like I am happy today. That's a very circumstantial or even very personal truth right now. And there is something transcendental that is bigger than this temporary truth, localized truth of this moment. And that universal truth is linked to Om. And the Mul Mantra describes that. Mul Mantra is the culmination of Japji, and the Japji is like the distillation of the essence of Japji. And Japji contains the essence of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which is the sacred book of the Guru. So again, we are coming upon something similar to what Mandukya Upanishad is for the Hindu scriptures. And it's basically saying this. There is a truth that goes beyond time. From before, from now, afterwards, it will be true. That's that truth we have to relate to. And that truth is Om. Om is that true. So, everything that was, is, or will be, is, in truth, Om. All else which transcends time, space, and causation is also Om. So everything else that also transcends time and space, which it talks about this circumstance where we are right now, is also Om. Now that's interesting if you consider what I was talking on Tuesday. I was talking about the date of birth, and I was mentioning how we move from where we are and we want to reach our destiny, and we have a challenge in the middle, which is based on the drama that we get addicted to, this drama that Maya helps us create through this illusion of separation, and the karma that we create in the process of trying to understand what are we doing in this world of Maya. So there is the karma and the drama, which is linked to time and space, and it's set up as a barrier between where we are and where we want to be, our destiny. And so this second part of the first line of the Upanishad is saying, everything else that also transcends the time and the space and causation is linked to cause and effect. That's also Om. So Om contains everything, and particularly everything that is truth. So truth is aligned with Om. All right. Let me do it like this, and then I'll show you the diagram because I don't want to confuse. Sarvam hitat brahmayam atma brahma soyam atma chatushapat. All of this, everywhere, is in truth Brahman, the absolute reality. So he's connecting into the Om that we were just talking about. He's saying all this is in truth Brahman, the absolute reality. Excuse me. This very self itself, Atman, is also Brahman, the absolute reality. This Atman or self has 4 aspects through which it operates. So he's telling us Atman, the soul, is the same as, is linked to the self, is equating soul, self, or Atman, self, and Brahman. And he's like making an equation just saying equals. Soul equals self equals Brahman. Brahman being the absolute reality, what we generally translate as God. And so what this is saying is, okay, everything that transcends time and space and anything that is local and temporary, that's Om. And Om is linked to Brahman, God, this absolute reality, and the self and the Atman is also that. There is an equation, there is an equal sign. They are the same. This is why it's called the path of self-realization, because we don't realize that. We are not aware of that. We don't feel like God. We don't feel that we transcend time and space. So there is a limited sense of self. We are not yet knowledgeable of the real self. Yeah, we are in our false sense of self linked to the ego. We have to transcend this to connect to the real self, and that's what we call the path of self-knowledge and self-realization. So this is the path that we are going to be exploring in this Upanishad. And it is saying that this Atman, or self, has 4 aspects through which it operates. And here there is this diagram that it's a very nice diagram. It's slightly different from the way I generally like to talk about consciousness, but it's very interesting in the sense that it describes very visually something that is what we can read in the text. We will see. Here in this diagram, you will see that there is a waking aspect, there is a dreaming aspect, there is a deep sleep, and there is a 4th kind of state. Now, when we were talking about consciousness in the course on the mind, if you haven't watched it, I recommend that course. There was one, I approached it from the West and from the East, and when I was looking from the Western perspective, I was considering what is consciousness. And when you go to psychology, you talk about the conscious self, the subconscious self, and the unconscious self. And what correspondence would that have in the Eastern approach? And I came upon some texts from Vedanta, and I was reading, I think it was Swami Shivananda, and we were relating that to these 4 different states that are called Jagrat, Swapana, Sushupti, and Turiya. Turiya being beyond. I wrote it down up here. And I was doing this diagram because I like the way this diagram explains the 5 states of consciousness in terms of the 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we understand that the way this would be described in Vedanta, and now we are just seeing it in Mandukya Upanishad, is talking about there is an awakened state, there is a dreaming state, and there is a sleep state. Let's read that from Mandukya Upanishad. But if you are familiar with this diagram, because I've used it many times, then you will recognize that we are talking about these different states of consciousness. And the difference is that what I call, in this diagram I say subconscious, what is sub, underneath consciousness, so that would be the dream world, and unconscious is not conscious, and that will be deep sleep. And the difference with this diagram from swamij.com is that here they are describing the waking, that's the conscious, the dreaming, this is already the link to the unconscious. And I would separate this light blue and darker blue, or almost purple, the active and the latent unconscious. The active is what I call the subconscious, and the latent is what I call the unconscious. Basically, it's the same. I'm just translating to the terminology that I generally utilize when I talk about consciousness. Just not to avoid confusion, okay? So let's read the third line. First, and you see Jakarta, that's the Jagrat. This is the when we read this translation, they are not going to say Jagrat, but if you remember when we were exploring this diagram, this is when we wrote Jagrat here as the state of consciousness of being awake. So, and you will see down here in the second line, in the fourth line, you will see Swapna, right? And that, as you can see, is here the Swapna. Yeah. So, and then Sushupti being the deep sleep. In here we will find it as Sushuptam and Sushupta. Yeah. So we are talking the same, okay? This is just to confirm that we are in the same system. We are not like pulling away from different systems. We're talking about the same system. So first is the waking state. The first aspect of Atman is the self in the waking state. So what the self is experiencing during the waking moments. And he calls that Vaishvanara, this state. In this first state, consciousness is turned outward towards the external world. Through its 7 instruments and 19 channels, it experiences the gross objects of the phenomenal world. Okay, I'll go slower over these different aspects. What does it mean? First of all, just notice consciousness is turned outward towards the external world. And that's why sometimes it is said that the experience you are having within this state of Vaishvanara is linked to the gross object. The object of the attention of your experience is gross, which will contrast with subtle and causal as it will come later on. So this is the gross objects that we are being focused on in the state of Vaishvanara, and the attention, the consciousness is turned outwards towards the external world. Well, in the path of meditation, just as Patanjali will later formulate in the Yoga Sutras, and I say later because that comes afterwards, he will say, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So in order to get to samadhi, which is, we want to get there, that's part of what we are talking about, we have to go through meditation, dhyana. To meditate, we need to concentrate, dharana. But to concentrate, why do we need to concentrate? Because we are disconcentrated. We are dispersed into the outside world, into the gross world, through these outward senses. And so the first step previous to dharana, dhyana, and samadhi has to be pratyahara, which is this tuning in and turning in these senses. So this is what this very old Upanishad is telling us, that in the first state, the consciousness is turned outward. So we are focusing outward. So it's natural later Patanjali will tell us, well, then bring all the senses inwards. Bring them in. And these 7 instruments and 19 channels, well, I'm not going to go in depth into this. I was checking what are these 7 instruments because I wasn't sure about this. I found a text in the Mandukya Upanishad which mentions that the 7 limbs, sometimes called the 7 limbs, the 7 objects, instruments, 7 limbs are, it's translated as 7 limbs often. The heavens are his head, the sun his eyes, the air his breath, the fire his heart, the water his stomach, the earth his feet, and space, or akasha, is his body. So you can see kind of a correlation with the 7 chakras, But basically, you can see that it's a relationship. These 7 limbs would be the 5 tattvas, and then 2 extra ones linked to ourselves, and maybe something beyond, like it's saying the heavens are the head. So you can probably interpret this much more. Like I was saying, some things you can interpret, some things not so much. But it's certainly linked to these 7 chakras, and the 5 first chakras are linked to the 5 elements, the 5 tattvas, and then what is going beyond these 5 tattvas. In swamij.com, this little star that they have over here, the 7 instruments, they call it the 5 tattvas, individuation, and the energy flow. It's basically the same. The 19 channels, this is also described somewhere else. So in the Mandukya Upanishad, sometimes they make a reference to something that is already described somewhere else. So that's one of those things. It's telling us we are lost in the outside world. Well, how are we lost in the outside world? First of all, through the senses. The senses are what we call the indriyas, and we know we have 5 going outwards and 5 going inwards. Gyanindriyas and karmindriyas. The ones that are coming inwards are how we capture information from the world through the 5 senses. So smell, touch, sight, and so on. And the 5 going outwards is how we interact with the world. So if we hear through the hearing, we can speak into the world. So that's the actions into the outside world. That's the karmindriyas. So we have 5 senses of perception and 5 senses of action into the world. Those make 10. Then 5 more are the 5 pranas, which are different movement of energy throughout the body. There's the prana, apana, samana, udana, and vyana. And maybe I'll do that some other day in some other video. I'm not going to go into this right now. But these 5 different forms of energy that are circulating within us. So there is the how we interact with the world, with the senses, and the energy movement through within us. So that's 5 plus 5 plus 5. So that's 15 already. How many was? Sorry, I lost the page. There we go. It was 19. Yeah, so it's 5 pranas, the 5 and 5 gyanindriyas and karmindriyas, and the last 4 are the 4 functions of the mind. So that's manas, chitta, buddhi, and ahankara. The exact meaning of this is mentioned in the commentary of this Upanishad called Gaudapada Karika. Yes, that's another Upanishad. It's a very important one, considered one of those 10 major Upanishads. And I thought about whether we would talk about this one today or not, but that's a much longer one. So if we're going to go into that one, maybe we will do it another day. But yes, thank you for bringing it in, Infinity. It certainly is one of the important ones. What does Karika mean, I wonder? Because one of the texts from Sankhya, most important, is Samkhya Karika. I'm wondering what the Karika means. If you know it, or you can search, just let us know here in the chat. It would be nice to find out what Karika means. But yeah, that would be like an explanation of this Upanishad. Very good. Excellent. I see that I'm not just talking into the void. Somebody's here listening. Good, thank you. All right, so this is all about this first state, the gross attention to the gross objects, and is the waking state. Now, Jagrat, this concept of Jagrat, when I went into the different states of consciousness, I talked about how very often we are not really conscious. We are in the semi-conscious state, and that's why in this drawing I made the separation between Jagrat and the semi-conscious, because we are daydreaming. We are thinking about writing an email while we are driving our car, and that's a mixture of states of consciousness. That's not awake and that's not dreaming. That's an in-between. It actually, in swamij.com, when they go through this diagram, they also talk about how there is these different lines, these transition lines, and there is a particular name for each one of them. We're not going to go into that, but there is this transition line between waking and dreaming would be like sleepwalking, or it could be like daydreaming. That could be here. So we are half awake, half asleep. So what is happening? Yeah. So we are in the middle between We are still kind of conscious, but there is something happening from the dream world. Kari comments commentary, which comes in the form of verses. Excellent. Thank you. Because kar meaning action, I was wondering what it meant. Thank you very much. So, commentary. That makes sense. All right. So, we were just exploring the waking state, Jagrat, but there will be an in-between between the first one and the second one. But let's go to the second. The second is the dreaming or the subtle. The second aspect of Atman is the self in the dreaming state. And this state, they call it Taijasa. But again, Swapna is the name of the state of consciousness. Here they call it Taijasa. It's basically the same. It's all connected to the same. In this second state, consciousness is turned towards the inner world. So rather than focusing on the outside, we're focusing in the inside. Let's see what Sahel says. Karika, concise statement in verse of doctrines. All right. Concise statement in verse of doctrines. Thank you. So it's like a commentary, but it's not just like a regular text, but it's actually in the form of verses of doctrines. That's great. Thank you. That's very good. Teamwork. All right. So the second state, consciousness is turned towards the inner world. Now, that's interesting because we connect that to dreaming, but isn't it so often that when we close our eyes to meditate, it's hard to tell whether we are meditating or we're having a daydream. It often comes these images and these things happening, and actually we can often fall asleep while we're meditating, right? Because we are trying to go beyond this regular state of consciousness, conscious and semi-conscious, and the tendency of the mind is to go here into dreams. So to close our eyes and not be distracted outwards, but going inwards and not falling asleep, that's very hard. It's easy to fall asleep or have daydreams. So we end it into the daydreaming. Namaskar, Sandesh, hello. Welcome to the stream. We are with the Mandukya Upanishad today. And maybe it was you who said to talk about this one today. I was trying to figure out who was it that suggested to talk about the Mandukya and I think it was last week that somebody mentioned it, and I think it might have been you, because I was thinking, is it Infinite Stories? Is it Infinity? That the three of you were here as well, and Sohail was also here, but I think it was you. Excellent. Waheguru. So there we go. We're exploring your favorite Upanishad today. All right, so here we are in the line 4. You haven't missed that much. We are going very slowly. We are in line 4, and we are exploring how in the second state of consciousness, this dreaming state, we are turning towards the inner world. And so the object of our attention is not the gross objects, but the subtle objects. It also operates through the 7 instruments and the 19 channels, which we have already explored, and engage the subtle objects of the mental realm. So this is like diving deep into the mind, but rather than letting the mind create the fantasy, like in dreams, that they create the fantasy that we explore, we remain awake. Awake in the sense of conscious. We should remain conscious while we go into this second state, this swapana, when we explore in this second realm. The realm is called Taijasa. And here we go. That's the second one. Let's go for the third. The third is deep sleep, or causal. The third aspect of Atman is the self operating in deep sleep state, or prajna. In this third state, there is neither the desire for any gross or subtle object, nor any dream sequences. So we are beyond images. We are beyond fantasy. In deep sleep, all such experiences have receded or merged into the ground of undifferentiated consciousness. So consciousness is there. It's not differentiated, so it's united. And the experiences have receded. So there is no such thing as an experience. Even the experience that I am falling asleep, or the experience that time is passing by, or the experience that my legs are getting numb. None of this is there. In this third state, those experiences disappear. Now, generally, when we enter into this state is when we go to sleep and we fall into deep sleep, not dream, but deep sleep, and we don't experience anything in the body. But this is telling us that through a journey of consciousness, we can reach that state. And when you are in that state, there is also a recession of experiences. So you don't care about your body, you don't even care about your mind, you don't think, you are not aware of what is happening with the thoughts, you are just in pure consciousness. And then what could be happening there? Well, all such experiences have receded or merged into the ground of undifferentiated consciousness, and here one is filled with experience of bliss and can also find the way to clearer knowledge of the two receding states. So when you are able to reach that state with consciousness, you become aware of what were the previous states, and there is experience of bliss. If we can call it experience of bliss, because look, all such experiences have receded. Let's say that everything is left is like an aftertaste, like a certain blissful feeling. Not even an aftertaste, maybe it's like a before taste, like an original taste, because that's the original taste of your Atman. And when you go into that state, you can sense that slight spark of joy that starts to increase, and like a joy and an ecstasy that starts to fill you in from within. Six, find the experiencer. The one who experiences all of these states of consciousness is the omniscient, indwelling source and director of all. This one is the womb out of which all of the other emerge. All things originate from and dissolve back into this source. So this is the source of consciousness. And this is what the question, who am I, from self-knowledge, from self-inquiry that Ramana Maharshi was teaching, is triggering in us. When we are asking, who am I? And when we try to find the origin of anything that we are experiencing, even if I'm thinking something, well, what is the origin of that thought? Where does that thought arise from? Where is it arising from? Then we can go back to the origin where everything came from and where everything is going to go to. So it's the origin of everything and the ending result of everything. And that's that source. That's where we are looking for. So the fourth aspect of Atman or self is Turiya. It means the fourth. Turiya means the fourth. In this fourth state, consciousness is neither turned outward nor inward. And so when we were drawing this diagram, I mentioned that often it is said it's beyond Sushupti, farther down here, but it's even beyond than this. So I put it up here because I kind of related to the number 5 and 10. 10 is something extraordinary. Now, those of you who are starting to follow the Karan Kriya course, you will recognize that now we can make more explicit the numbers here. So that's 1 and 9, this is 2 and 8, this is 3 and 7, this is 4 and 6. And these 4, they have nothing to do with what the fifth has. The fifth is really beyond those. Even though I put it up here because it's number 5, 10 is something extraordinary. It's something that goes really beyond these 5 regular other states. So in Vedanta or in the Vedas, or in this case we are reading in this Mandukya Upanishad, we will find that the fourth state, and they are read like this: Jagrat, Sapana, Sushupti, and then Turiya. But yeah, it's beyond inwards or onwards, is somewhere extraordinary. That's a language that sometimes we use for the 10, is something extraordinary. And we know that 10 is associated to Brahman and God. So that's a consciousness that is linked to God, as we will read in a moment. So neither inward nor outward, nor is it both, it is beyond both cognition and the absence of cognition. Now we are really going away from cognition. So in a way, it's beyond the mind. This fourth state of Turiya cannot be experienced through the senses or known by comparison, deductive reasoning, or inference. It is indescribable, incomprehensible, and unthinkable with the mind. So I mentioned this at the beginning of today's talk, that we try to do our best. We have to talk about it, because otherwise we don't know it exists. But we cannot describe it. And I do my best to say, well, it's something extraordinary, it's beyond these ones, but it really doesn't say anything. Because what can I possibly say that is going to help my mind understand what it is? We cannot. It's undescribable and incomprehensible. It's something that can only be experienced as pure consciousness. We cannot describe it so that our intellectual mind, our cognitive capacity, the cognition, can understand. It's something that is, let's read this again. The fourth state, never mind, cannot be experienced through the senses or known by comparison, deductive reasoning, or inference. It is undescribable, incomprehensible, and unthinkable with the mind. This is pure consciousness itself. This is the real self. It is within the cessation of all phenomena. It is serene, tranquil, filled with bliss, and is one without second. This is the real or true self that is to be realized. And sometimes we may have a little taste of this when we are meditating and we close our senses and we bring them inwards and we are looking for the source of any experience that we are having, this self-inquiry, who am I, who am I? And when we go to this source, there's moments of absolute peace and a little spark of joy. So that ocean of peace, the spark of joy, can become like a big explosion. You can merge with that and become that. But you can have little tastes of this to tell you, look, this is the path that you have to go to get there. This is kind of like when we were talking about the 5 stages to wisdom, the 5 stages to wisdom. In the first stage, there is little samples of what's to come for you to be motivated to walk in that direction. It is serene, tranquil, filled with bliss, and is one without second. We say the true essence of who we are, true, that's Sat. The essence of who we are is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is the truth, Chit is consciousness, and we are talking here, this is pure consciousness, and Ananda, that's the bliss. So this is Sat Chit Ananda, reaching that through the 4th state of consciousness, or Turiya. So here is the different states of consciousness with the names, Vaisvanara, Taijasa, Prajna, and Turiya. And these are the first 7 lines of the Upanishad. You see, this is the 8th one. Those four aspects, those 4 states of consciousness are the same with Om and silence. A, U, M, and silence. So that's 4 things. That Om, though described as having 4 states, is indivisible. It is pure consciousness itself. That consciousness is Om mantra. So this is the origin of Om. Where does Om come from? The 3 sounds, Om, and the 3 letters, A, U, M, are identical with the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. So this is the 3 things that Om represents. And here we can have it in a diagram. So A, U, and M. The 4th state, Turiya, is to be realized only in the silence behind or beyond the other 3. So we put Om at the beginning of most mantras, and it's a way to connect to this essence. That's the origin of anything else and the final result of everything else. And so we connect to it through this Om, the vibration. And the The purpose of chanting mantras is to find the silence after you chant them. Mantras are there to protect the mind and to guide us in a certain path of consciousness. They are like equations, like formulas that when you chant them, it brings your consciousness through a certain direction. Now, after you chant it and you chant it and you chant it, you are meant to fall into the silence and listen into that silence. And in that silence, you have the capacity to connect to this fourth state. That's the Turiya. And then he just goes lower, saying the same. The sound A is waking or gross, linked to the gross objects. Vajvanara is the consciousness experience during the waking state. That is A, the first letter of the Om mantra. The simple sound of A is first and permeates all other sounds. Now this is interesting. One who is aware of this first level of reality has fulfillment of all longings and is successful. Yeah? Longings and successful. I find that very, very interesting. Longings is, kama is desire. Yeah, you can see this kama here. Longing is like the purest state of desire. Because kama can be one of the 5 evils, one of the 5 things that trap our energy. We want something and then we twist and turn in our life to try to get that thing. But even to try to want to get to Turiya, that's a certain kind of desire. But let's call that a longing. We long to belong. We long to belong to something greater than us. We long to connect to the source from which we departed at some point and we feel separate from, and we feel a veil in between us. So we long to go back to that source. That longing gets fulfilled through that exploring and being fully aware. But it's not just about awareness of that, it's about mastery of that level. And you are also successful. You could ask yourself, what does success mean? What does success mean in this context? Let's carry on. The sound U is dreaming, subtle. Taijasa is the consciousness experience during the dreaming state, and is U. The second letter of Om mantra. This intermediate state operates between the waking and sleeping states, reflecting some qualities of the other two. One who knows the subtler state is superior to others. For one who knows this, knowers of Brahman, the absolute reality, will be born into his family. The subtler state. I'm thinking, somehow I was being pulled towards these practices when I was way before I was doing yoga more as an adult, but when I was doing my lucid dreaming practices, which as some of you may know, I did it for a good number of years, maybe something like 8 years before I started meditative practice. And actually, once I started to meditate, I stopped doing lucid dreamings because I really didn't feel any need for them anymore. But lucid dreaming was an extraordinary training for me because I would be awake and then I would close my eyes and I would train myself to do this path consciously. So to be from here and cross through here consciously and being awake while I was here. Now, lucid dreaming is not the same as what this is describing. Yeah, being fully, let's say, being a master of this state. It is not. But I think it was a good training to relate myself to what was happening in my subconscious. So being awake in your dreams was quite an interesting indirect way to connect to this aspect of my own mind. Not that I recommend it, as I said. Now, when I started meditating, I didn't feel the need to go into lucid dreaming anymore. But it was interesting that my path would take me in that direction. So exploring this state through lucid dreaming. It certainly was quite special to be the master of your own dreams, to be in any dream and be able to change anything I wanted. And, I could produce a saint and have him next to me playing the harmonium, and I would be chanting mantras with him if I wanted. And I did that. So, I could just produce whatever my mind desired, which is an interesting consideration of the power of the mind. How deep can the mind, the power that the mind has on us? It's incredible. But I was addicted to those dreams as well. So I was addicted to that state of dreaming, and probably even now there is some shadow of that addiction, of wanting to go into that state. There is a pulling in me towards that dream state, but not in the way that I remain fully awake, but into going into that dream state through this conscious dreaming or lucid dreaming. So, nothing is just beautiful. Everything has both sides, the darkness and the light. But let's go back to this description. Let's go for the 11th. The sound M is deep sleep. Prajna is this consciousness experienced during the state of dreamless deep sleep, and is M, the third letter of Om. It contains the other two, and is that from which the other two emerge, and into they recede or merge. A knower of this more subtle state can understand all within himself. Now that's about being, when he says a knower of this more subtle state, that's like being a master of your, even up to the level of your unconscious. So that implies also mastery over your samskaras, because they are there in between the deepest layer of the subconscious and the unconscious. That's the sleeping seeds of karmas. So to say that you are a master of this, that's quite a lot. That's a big statement. And okay. Maybe that's why it's also called the causal realm. Yeah. Cause and effect, like karmas. Now the silence after Om, this is the final one, is the true self. The fourth aspect is the soundless aspect of Om mantra. It is not utterable and is not comprehended through the senses or by the mind. With the cessation of all phenomena, even of bliss, this soundless aspect becomes known. It is a state of non-dual, Advaita, reality, one without a second. This fourth state, Turiya, is the real self or true self. One with direct experience of this expands to universal consciousness. Infinity is saying, dream yoga is to master swapna, Bardo yoga is for Shushupti. Yes, there would be the dream yoga. Are you talking about lucid dreaming? Sorry, are you talking about yoga nidra as well? Because I know that there is a practice in Buddhist practice on meditating on the dreams, and you are becoming a master of the dream state through meditation. So I'm not sure whether you are talking about that or you are referring to yoga nidra. But yes, it would definitely be about mastering this state, swapna. Yeah. And then comes Sushupti, and then we are going into the beyond. The last one we were talking about, this is beyond, this is Turiya. And he's saying that it's the fourth state is the real self or true self. Now, you can become aware of the self through this process of self-inquiry. For example, that's one possibility. You can begin to have this solidified, crystallized, clear sense of self beyond this particular life and beyond whatever is happening in the mind. And the more you solidify your experience in that place, the more you feel you exist. And yet, there is still a veil. It's through here, but it's not just here, because one with direct experience of this expands into the universal consciousness. So there is the real self, and there is the universal consciousness, and there is this little veil between the one and the other. And I explored this in another video when we talked about the four kinds of self: the higher self, the false self, the real self, the hidden self. And so we are talking now about the real self and how you get into contact with this reality, this Satnam, and then that's like a gateway towards the universal consciousness, but there is also no guarantee that some grace has to come to bless you into that space. So, or that understanding, or that, I don't know how to say it, awareness that you expand into the universal consciousness. So that the grace has to happen for it. It's a leap in consciousness for that to occur. But it is certainly through that space, through the space of the real self. And that's the Mandukya Upanishad. So very interesting. It's telling us about the Om and how the chanting of Om can take us in this path of realization of the different states of consciousness. And the path is taking us to the state of awareness of the real self, who we truly are. How do you hear it? Those of you who are online right now, how does it sound to you? We're going to be chanting today. We're going to be chanting Om. Often when I have to chant Om, I end up chanting Ong, because Ong is much more collecting the essence and bringing myself to one point. But today I'm going to chant the Om as it is, just Om, because that's the way it is written in the original text. And so since we are meditating on this text, it makes sense that we chant just Om, not Ong, with a G at the end. Very interesting, Vahiru? Yeah. Sandesh, how do you... what did you get out of this? You were saying that it was your favorite Upanishad. How did you relate to it? Does it serve you in your practice as well? Are you aware of this when you are closing your eyes for meditation, when you are tuning in to yourself? I wonder if it's working in that way. I'm thinking, I know you do martial arts. You can also tune into that space of self when you are doing martial arts, or when you're doing anything in the world, really. You are operating in the world, and very often we are narrating what we do. We are speaking in our mind what we are doing, or we are distracted and we are in a fantasy doing something else. So maybe I'm cleaning the dishes, but I'm thinking about something else that I'm going to buy later. Or I'm telling myself what I'm doing. Oh yeah, I need to put some more soap. Oh, this is dirty. I need to clean it up. Yes, you are? Okay. And you can be cleaning the dishes and not narrating to yourself what you are doing. Just stepping back, allowing the cleaning to happen, noticing your hands cleaning the dishes and just being into the self. Receding back to the origin, to the source. Yeah, receding back is like the waves, ebb and flow, waves of consciousness back to the origin, this state, in the heart, the real self. So you go to that state and you observe your hands cleaning. Now you can do that anywhere, and you can be doing martial arts and you can be receding to that state. And I believe that's much closer to that state of flow that it's very in fashion now. When you are doing sports or something like that, they say, oh, he's in the flow, like everything is flowing, everything is going well, and you are performing at your peak, at your optimum, at your best. And that can be, you are in martial arts and you are not thinking about the technique. You don't have to think what you're doing. Somebody's coming towards you and it's not just muscle memory either. It's about a different state of consciousness, and you are just in yourself and you are noticing yourself doing the technique, and you are just there in the presence of the self. So in a way, when you tune in to that aspect of the self, yoga becomes any second of your day, any moment of your life. Even if you are speaking to someone, even if you are writing an email, or you are cooking food for your children, or you are doing martial arts and teaching, whatever, you can be doing yoga at the same time. That's why yoga becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a day-to-day, a living, a breathing, and a remembrance, a simran. Yeah, remembering the name, remembering the mantra, remembering Sat Nam within you, and just whatever you are doing. In spiritual martial arts, it's a dynamic meditation. Yes, exactly. It's a meditation in movement. And Infinity says in Chinese martial arts, this state is called the Tao, or Tao. Yes, and it's also, isn't it the beginning of the Tao Te Ching that says that everything is Tao and everything is the origin and is like also the ending of the Tao, something like that. I read it many, many years ago now. The Tao would be over 20 years ago, so I don't remember. But my memory is kind of saying that's what the Tao is. Tao is the origin of everything, and everything goes back to the Tao. So it's kind of the joining of all that. Kind of begins like the Mandukya Upanishad, kind of. But let me know, Infinity, if it says something like that. But yeah, it's that state. I like to, when I'm walking in the street in a city, I like to just imagine that I'm sitting still in myself and everybody's walking around me. I'm actually walking, but I'm not, I try to keep the eyes very, very focused in one point in front of me and just thinking that I'm still and the whole world is walking past me. And when you are in, you will try it, and then there will be a moment when you do like a click, and then you're in stillness. Everything is passing by, and there's like, and you're in the stillness of your consciousness is still in that moment. That's very, very interesting state, going into yourself and staying there, and then walking around anywhere that you go, just stay in that place. Especially when the breath is the master. Yeah, nice. Yes, the breath. The breath is the one element that connects everything. Body, emotions, energy, mind, and spirit, because inspiring is part of the spirit, bring the spirit in. The breath is the thing that connects all of it. And yet when you become the master of that state, you become also the master of the breath. Therefore, the example of Swami Rama being able to just stop the breath, stop the heart, and still being able to continue existing and talking. If it says exactly, it's like the source beyond yin and yang, from which all duality arises and goes back to being one again. Yes, exactly. That's how I remember, kind of. It's like the very final step. Do I have it? No, I don't have it. Of that, you may remember the diagram of the, how in the, what's it called? In Samkhya philosophy, we have the one unmanifested consciousness, and then it separates into two, Shiva Shakti or yin and yang. So that's the Tao coming, yin and yang coming out of the Tao, and then that's the origin. And then as your consciousness rises in this path upwards, then there's the union again. There's the rising and the union. Union, we know that's the word we use for yoga, and that's the word we use for samadhi. So that's the word. That's the way it would be described. By the way, samadhi would be, in this diagram, samadhi would be this. I was saying that every little line, it has a name for the transition, and samadhi would be the name of the transition from these more regular states of consciousness to this extraordinary state of consciousness of the fourth stage, or turiya. So this would be samadhi. Waheguru. That's an interesting meditation to do as well. Because the breath is connecting everything, we can just be aware of the breath and let the breath surprise you. So we can be in silence. We will do this. We will chant Om. And after we chant Om, we will fall into silence. I will not guide it, but let me say now what the experience should be. Should be. We're going to experiment. The experience that we're going to do today. So we're going to be chanting Om for a few minutes. Then we will go into silence. And when we are in this silence, just be aware of the silence and the breath. And in the silence, the breath may come in almost like a surprise. You don't have to breathe. The breath will come in. The universe breathes us. So it's like the spirit comes, and then it arises and goes back to the very same point, to the Tao, this origin, yeah? So you are like arising from that space and coming back to that space of silence. State or space or time, space, everything like beyond all this, time and space, beyond all this, in a moment of silence, in that zeroness, state of zero, what we call shunya, we will listen and feel how the breath arises and the breath goes back to that state. Let's experiment that. If you can, if you're moving around or you're driving or something, just keep your eyes on the road. Be careful with this. But if you can sit down and stay still for a while, that would be optimum. And if you can chant with me, that would be the best, because it's your own voice, and there's nothing more powerful than your own voice. Hearing yourself, your voice is your instrument, is your way to say I am, I exist, is through your voice. So chanting is a way to affirm your existence. Inhale deep. And exhale. Inhale for Om. Om. lip. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale deep. And exhale. And slowly open the eyes. Sadam. We will stop here today. I hope you reach some peaceful state, maybe with a spark of joy. And maybe we can do more of these sessions where we meditate together. It's a bit, I generally speak a lot, and here bringing all these teachings that I've learned through the spoken word, but it would be nice to sit down and meditate together every now and then as well. Meditate, meditate, meditate. Until next time, until next week. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing, for liking the video, and everyone who supports the channel as well. Thank you, Sadam.